The year was 2020. It was peak pandemic and I was doing my rounds on Tinder. And I was trying to get a girl to come over to my place since we couldn't go anywhere. Now I suggested that we share some good conversation over some wine. However, she told me she wasn't much of a drinker. Instead, she offered that we smoke together. Now at the time, I've only smoked a handful of times in college, so of course, I had no supply. But to my surprise, she said she would bring the good stuff free of charge. She came over, we got a little high, we had a business meeting, it was all good. However, the next few weeks, due to isolation and boredom, I found myself craving that feeling again. So I reached back out to her, this time as a customer. And that was pretty much the start of what would become an addiction. Now with me personally, I only smoked at night. It wasn't a wake and bake sort of thing. I would do all the work I had to do. So at the time, I would almost justify my use for using it. And to be honest, I saw no downside effects of using it for the first few years, which also rationalized my use of the Mary Jane. Now, it wasn't until around 2022 where I started noticing some negative effects. For one, I just noticed my lack of motivation and fulfillment in life was completely empty. I would wake up feeling unmotivated for things that I usually would enjoy, whether it be filming YouTube videos, going to the gym, going out, being social with friends. But I literally just didn't want to do anything. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was literally searching up, am I depressed? Because I never felt this way in my life. Like, why do I feel so negative and just down all the time? Not only that, but I felt like my social skills were taking a huge hit. It felt like I needed to be high just to speak to a new girl or to go out on a date or to even go out and do things with friends. And in some cases, I would even not go out and be social and stay home and just get high instead. And honestly, it started to feel like a crutch. And this is the same reason why some people get addicted to alcohol, especially when they go out in nightlife, because it feels like it makes them more charismatic. They don't feel like themselves if they don't have that drug. And that's what I started to feel like. Not to mention, it made my brain fog absolutely horrible. I never experienced brain fog in my life. Like, usually I'm very sharp, very articulate, but I found myself being crazy forgetful. I found myself not being able to articulate my thoughts and literally just having a cloud and empty head in my mind. And I was like, why do I feel this way? Like, I've always been able to like be sharp, be witty, but like over time, it just progressively got worse and worse. And like I said, the first few years, I never experienced any of this stuff. Now to bring it all home, I've also noticed that it made other addictions worse. Meaning that whenever you get high, you tend to lose your sense of logic and reason. Things you would usually do when you're sober, you kind of forget about it when you're under the influence. This also includes fapping and porn, right? Whenever you're under the influence, you guys know, you start doing shit that you normally wouldn't do. And so if you have an addiction in other areas, it's just gonna amplify that, and then you're gonna start dopamine stacking, which is horrible for your mental health and motivation. So this was the very first time I tried to quit. What I really wanted to do was just cut back once a week. And I actually did it for a few months. However, of course, I found myself going back to my original cycle, literally forgetting everything I've experienced, and was pretty much telling myself like, hey, it's not that bad. I can still manage this behavior within my normal routine. Now, despite knowing the downsides of weed, I had to ask myself, why do I continue to do it? Well, it took a bit of introspective thinking, but I believe these are the three reasons. Number one, it was a form of escapism. Listen, people do escapism for pretty much any drug, but for weed itself, it felt like that was the only time that I could personally relax and shut my brain off. It got to a point where I knew I had a busy day and I was looking forward to the night because I knew that was a time where I can wind down, relax, and kind of just shut everything out. However, I was being taken away from actual reality, which sounds good in the moment, but long-term definitely has negative effects. Also, I thought I was more creative. You probably heard this a ton of times. Oh, smoke the weed, you get better ideas. And in the moment, it felt that way up until I wasn't high though. And that's when I felt myself actually not being too creative, actually not having amazing ideas because I couldn't remember anything. And so why would you want something to give you good ideas, but you had to be under the use of the substance in order to get those ideas? And plus, research I've shown multiple times that weed doesn't necessarily enhance creativity. And then also it didn't help that I saw other successful people do it. And I was mostly comparing myself to entertainers, people who don't necessarily have to use their cognitive ability on a daily basis. Now, I do believe people in certain career fields can manage using Mary Jane. However, obviously it wasn't good for me. And I believe if you do any sort of cognitive jobs where you have to use your brain, you have to critically think, and you want maximum brain power, I highly recommend that you actually don't do it, and stop making those comparisons to other people like the way I was doing. So basically, I kept doing it, thinking that the pros would outweigh the cons. I vividly remember telling myself, you only live once, so you might as well enjoy your life while I'm here. And if weed is the only thing that makes me happy, then so be it. It wasn't until the night that changed everything. It was a cold, rainy Saturday evening. I was bored. I didn't feel like watching TV. I didn't feel like working. So I decided the next best thing, and that was to get high. However, this time I took an edible. Now, at first it was totally fine. However, after a few hours, I started to get so high that I literally did not feel in control of my mind or body. It was literally like an alien just hijacked my brain. I started to feel a rush of intense anxiety, and this is when I went into a legit full-blown panic attack. And honestly, this is the weirdest feeling I've ever felt. I was conscious enough to understand that I was high, but I was freaking out because I knew I could do nothing about it. My heart raced like crazy, and it literally felt like I was dying. Needless to say, since then, I said F that, now it's finally time to quit. I threw away everything that even reminded me of being high, and since then, I've never looked back. Now, not gonna lie, it's been a long 6 months, and you guys who have quit before understand how it kind of makes sleeping difficult, and that kind of makes, looking forward to the evenings less enjoyable. However, there also has been a lot of pros, and so far I wanna share with you what I have experienced. The first thing is better REM sleep and just overall memory. You guys don't understand. You think whenever you smoke weed, it's actually helping you go to sleep faster, which may be the case, but you actually get less quality sleep, and that's because marijuana affects your REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. This is the type of sleep where you tend to have a lot of dreams and just overall feel very restful. This is why in a lot of cases too, is that if you smoke, you notice that you don't dream at all, or you can't remember your dreams whatsoever. You feel like you had a great sleep, but you always wake up groggy with brain fog, just not feeling like your complete self. Now, when I got off, I started having way more vivid dreams, and in some cases literally going into sleep paralysis, which is a negative side effect. However, over time, I found my REM sleep score going higher and higher, and now I wake up feeling so much more rested and restful. I track my sleep every night, so I'm literally able to track these measurements, and since then, I just feel better, I look better, and also my memory has effectively improved. I literally feel like I can remember things from so long ago that I usually wouldn't be able to remember. Now, remember how I mentioned how I felt just a dullness in life? I felt a lack of motivation to do the things that I usually would enjoy. Well, over time, I actually felt that spark of enjoyment back again. I actually feel like going to the gym. I actually feel like doing the things that I usually would have enjoyed in the past. And it doesn't feel forced, because I would still do it through the discipline, but it's just a different feeling whenever you have the motivation and the drive to actually tackle your goals and to accomplish things in your life. And I truly feel like whenever you smoke weed consistently on a long-term basis, I'm talking about years on end, it will just ruin your motivation and your drive towards life. And that's simply because it really just affects your dopamine receptors. Think about it. Substances and things that you stack, especially when you're high, because when you get high, you'll scroll social media, you might do other vices or addictions that are bad, and for that reason, you're just spiking your dopamine to extreme levels. And whenever you do that, your dopamine is gonna fall way below baseline. That's why the next day, it feels like you have to get back to that dopamine high again in order to feel like your normal self. Now imagine doing that for years on end. Effectively, you're gonna eventually start feeling like a zombie whenever you're sober. Now, since I usually was smoking the evenings or night, I've noticed that personally I've been spending my evening times to be more productive. Instead of getting high, scrolling social media or just going to sleep, I instead read a book now. I go out for walks, I'm more social, I'm more lively, or sometimes I even just keep working and I discover things and realize things that I didn't realize I was lacking out on in the past because I was putting myself in such a comfortable environment, and that was induced through the weed intake. That's why if you're really trying to tackle your goals, if you really want the highest motivation and drive to just feel like you can actually do something worthwhile, it makes sense to just quit cold turkey. You won't actually understand or experience this feeling until you quit for around 3 or 6 months. Now, obviously, this is still a work in progress. It's only been 6 months, so I'm curious to see the more positive effects that might come after a year or 2 years. But so far, I can definitely see myself doing this long term. And if you ever thought about quitting, let this video ignite you to actually make that positive change in your life. And remember, you're only hindering yourself. Vices overall is basically self-sabotage towards your success. And once you start to understand that, that's when you'll actually start to make a change. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know down below in the comments your personal experiences with this. If you had any pros or maybe even cons, let me know down below. I'm curious to hear your guys' stories too. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.